So thank you for coming and being here to share this show with you. It's very special for me. So the show is called A Brush with Herstory, and the theme is historical women artists. And I've been doing paintings on this theme for about 11 years now. So I will tell you how this started. How did this come about? So one day I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I visited it my whole life. I was there and I was with my mother, and we came upon this beautiful painting. And I was taken aback by it. It's magnificent. If you visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art, look for this painting. It's a big, beautiful painting. And it's by an artist I had never ever heard of. Her name's Adelaide Guillard. And the story intrigued me on the label. It is her in the blue dress painting and looking out at the audience. And she has these two women behind her. And the label said they were two artists that were not allowed to exhibit their work at the time. Adelaide, as I read on the label and learned a little bit more about her, was one of 4 women who were in the Royal Academy of Painting and Sculpture in France. She was French. And she was allowed to exhibit her work along with all the men in the Royal Academy. There were only 4 women allowed at one time, and she was one of them. And with this painting, she brought her 2 students into the show via her painting. So I love that story. When I read that, I said, I want to know more about her. And so, you know, the painting stuck with me. I had been working on a show, and I was not working on this theme at all. I'm a narrative painter. I do several themes, and I wasn't doing this at the time, but the painting kept resonating with me, and I thought about it for some reason. It was almost like the painting haunted me. So one day, I had been working on so many paintings at once because I had to finish paintings for a show. I pulled a book off a bookshelf, and the book actually was Women Artists 1550 to 1950, and it was Anne Sutherland Harris's book and Linda Nochlund's book, by an interesting coincidence that you were talking about. And it has a lot of biographies in it. And so I took the book off the shelf, not really knowing. I mean, I used to live by Strand Bookstore, and I'd go into Strand and pick up books for $1, $5, and this was one of those books that I had never really, read in depth. So I pulled the books off the bookshelf, and I sat down and I opened the book, and it was to her biography. And it was such an interesting story about her. She was a teacher to women artists, and I read the story about the destruction of one of her largest paintings, which is the painting out there, the burning of her masterpiece. And it just, her whole story it resonated with me. So I decided, I said, I can't believe that I never ever heard of her. And I said, I'm gonna try and honor these women artists in this. I was looking so many, I didn't know anything about any of these artists, and I'm like, I'm gonna try and use my art to honor them. So that's how I started. So if you look here, these are all different paintings I've done. And what I decided to do was to use my features and my face and insert my image into their self-portraits. So these are all me, recreating them in my own sort of interpretive way. So you can see Frida Kahlo is in the center. And the reason I used Frida is because I feel like all these women should be recognized like Frida. We should all know about them. They were all great. They all had such amazing stories. So the goal is to get us to that sort of recognition and, interest in their life. So that's kind of how it started. It was simple portraits that I started doing. Okay, so right here is the first painting where I started to say, well, I like to tell stories. So I'm going to try and do, rather than just the face, I'm going to try and do a scene, recreating something of their life story. So here it is. It's Adelaide Labiocchi-Art's painting that I kind of used as the central subject. You can see in the gray, that's self-portrait with two pupils. And what I decided to do was to have Adelaide turned and talking as she's painting to two other artists. So it's sort of a little bit of a spin on her painting that painting. In Adelaide's painting, you don't see the painting. It's the opposite. You don't know what's on the canvas. So here I kind of flipped that idea. Okay, so here's a continuation of the types of paintings I'm doing, their narrative. Here's Remedios Varo, and she's a fascinating artist. You guys should look her up. She did surrealism, para-surrealism. She was born in Spain, and she had such an interesting life. I mean, she fled Europe, and she went to Mexico, and Diego Rivera absolutely loved her work. Even though Diego and Frida, they resisted European painters because they were very close. The Mexican art was the thing, but he loved her paintings. She was exceptional. And this particular painting is recreating a painting by Remedios Varo called Celestial Pablum, where, the figure in Remedios' painting is feeding a moon that's in a cage. So her style is not realistic at all, so I recreated it in my own style, and I just thought it was such a magical image that I wanted to do something with it. Oops, okay, wait, let me go back. Oh, there it is. See, there's the painting. I saw this painting in person. It was a real thrill for me. It was in New York City at a gallery called Di Donna, and they had a few Remedios Varo paintings, so that was a real treat. It's a treat when you see these paintings in the real, in live, rather than in a book. They're so much more subtle, so it's a wonderful thing. Okay, so here's Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun. So after I started doing the paintings where I had the oil paintings and I did it in oil, here I started doing drawings to pay homage to Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun. She had a show at the Met about 3 years ago, a wonderful show. She was extremely prolific. She painted more than 800 paintings in her life. She painted Queen Marie Antoinette more than 25 times. It might have been something like 30. So she was remarkable, extremely prolific painter, very dedicated. So I love her work. And here you can see that's kind of the painting I used for the drawing. So I looked at this and I kind of turned it into the drawing that you just saw. Okay, so here's Sofonisba Huizola, and it's very exciting right now. The Prado Museum in Madrid, if you all have a chance, you should all visit the museum and go see a show called Sofonisba Huizola and Lavinia Fontana, A Tale of Two Painters. And so I saw the show and I was thrilled. I got to see a lot of her paintings. And so I think she's so exceptional. She lived a long life. She was a court painter for Philippe II, and she did a lot of, portraits. She was very fine portraitist. One of her most famous paintings is the chess game, and I think that painting, let me see if I put it on here. Here's the subway poster in Madrid right now, so that's a real thrill. And actually that painting is the one I used for the drawing, so that was kind of exciting for me. Here's the chess game. I feel it's one of the masterpieces of women artists. It's such a fine painting, it's beautifully done. You cannot appreciate this painting in a photo. You have to see it in the museum. And here's where I first saw it. It was in the city of Ghent. It was in a show called The Ladies of Baroque. So I went there to see that, and there was a wonderful combination of women artists from the Baroque period. So here's another painting. It's also a tribute to historical women artists. It's a still life. And what I did was, the artists are Anne Valier-Coaster, Clara Peters, and Rachel Bush. These three women were wonderful still life painters. And I wanted to do a homage to them. However, they're not figurative. And my specialty is, of course, figurative, but I can do still life. And I said to myself, the only way I can do this is to take their objects and combine it. I thought I could combine it into one painting. Every object here is taken from one of their still lives. So if you want to learn about them, you will find the painting that I used, the soup tureen by Anna Valier-Coaster. There's the Clara Peters goblet over there. Rachel Bush is the lizard and the nest and the monarch butterfly. So these are all their objects that I composed into this one painting. So you can see here, this is Clara Peters. You can see the type of painting she did. She did, breakfast painting. She was in the earliest group of doing this type of painting. And I had read somewhere that she may have been one of the first painters to paint fish in history. So it's very interesting what you learn. Okay, so this is Rachel Bush. And you can see the nest, the lizard, the monarch butterfly, the fruits I use. So it's a very famous painting of hers. So that's the idea of. And there's the lobster by Anne Valier-Coaster. So you get the idea of what I did. So here's my latest project. I have put together a project called the Homage Ode Project. And it's works on paper with mixed media. I'll use oils, I'll use ink, depending on the work. And I will write a short poem about the artist. And I will take their art and create a design very much like, it's inspired by illuminated manuscripts. So you'll see gold on the pieces, and the poetry is original, and their work is designed into it. So my plan is to publish a book with all these women artists in this book. Is this working?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so you can see Giovanna Garzoni's cherries that I used in the previous illuminated manuscript. And by the way, she's having a show in the Uffizi in the spring. So her work is wonderful. She painted for the Medici. And it's very fine work. She worked on vellum, and it's an incredible technique she used. You cannot appreciate it here. You've got to really see, what her work is like. So this is a list. I actually made copies of this, and I can hand them out later. And it's all the shows that are around the world with women artists showing. So if you're interested, you can, you have all the shows listed here. And kind of what has to happen, I mean, if we want things to actually change, it takes constant effort. It can't be, oh, one day, you talk about it. It's a lot of people, a lot of effort. I try to share this stuff with kids in school, teachers. Teachers can help and bring these names into the classroom. That is going to be the key, because they're the future curators and museum people and, influential people that are going to bring attention to, they are a part of history. So, so that's kind of where it has to come from. And so that's kind of my little role in this, and I love doing it. And that's kind of my whole spiel.